meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. It will also be recorded and subsequently available on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? Following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 7, Councillor Bayford. Item 8, Councillor Davis. Item 10, Councillor Bayford. And item 12, Councillor Davis. Do any other members wish to speak under 20.1? Councillor Wing. What was that?
15, I think they're by
15, right.
Yeah, 15, yeah, by the
It's the last one.
Yeah, it's not actually. There's another one. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Number 6, please, and number 13. Thank you.
Okay. Any more for any more? Cabinet is all here, so there are no apologies. Declarations of interest. I am going to declare a significant interest in item 16 as a member of the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board, and Councillor Whitehead has kindly volunteered to take the chair for that item. Does anybody else have any interest to declare? No. Minutes of the previous meeting on the 22nd of January. I propose we take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Albon. Members agree? Thank you. Minutes of the extraordinary meeting on the 16th of February. Propose we take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bright. Thank you. Members agree? Thank you. And we move on to the first substantive item, one of many this evening to be presented by Councillor Whitehead, which is the Tenant Leaseholder Services KPIs Q3 2025-26.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight we bring the performance KPIs for Q3 to Cabinet. The Q3 KPIs are indicative of the trends we would expect at this time of year, namely an increase in responsive repairs demand and an increase in repairs for BSW, our gas contractor. The demand for the responsive repairs contracts was high across this period. Mears experienced similar demand to the previous quarter with 2,805 repairs, whereas BSW experienced a significant 268% increase in repairs from Q2. This is usually driven by the seasonal switch on of heating and issues being noted with heating systems that residents may not have seen before. The KPIs show that both contractors performed well with high customer satisfaction results. There was high demand for work in line with damp, mould and condensation. 122 new cases were recorded in Q3, a 114% increase from Q2. This is again in line with what we would expect for this time of year. Landlord compliance performance remains consistent. The dashboard also includes something that is particularly exciting from my perspective, and something that our tenant and leaseholder group were also particularly excited about, as their support for this project has been very strong. Due to the significant growth in our in-house TA portfolio, a range of KPIs are now included within the quarterly statistics. Recording compliance with the Council's temporary accommodation housing stock as one figure is a hugely exciting point to have reached, and our tenant and leaseholder group, many of whom have either direct or indirect experience of TA, are massively supportive, and we're equally excited about us reaching this point. Our gas safety compliance is at 100% and electrical safety compliance at 99.94%, with 0 A or B defects outstanding. We keep a very close eye on the overdue FRA actions, of which there are currently 282 outstanding. Many are due to planned works, for which we now have contracts in place to carry out the work required. For example, the fire door contract to replace fire doors in low-rise flatted blocks, and the work that is already going on at our tower blocks. We have also recently introduced a compliance officer that is dedicated solely to FRA actions. Progress on compliance is increasing significantly, with compliance closing out 177 actions in Q3 in comparison to 80 in the previous quarter. More than doubling our processing is significant and will make a huge difference moving forwards. One KPI that will stand out is the drop in properties that are registering as non-decent, which has dropped by 9%. On first sight, this could seem alarming. However, this is due to us improving the quality of our stock condition data, and at that point represented 447 properties. Further work has been done, and this figure currently stands at 364 as of today. 351 of the properties failing decent homes is due to insufficient lofts insulation, 5 centimetres below national requirements. To check the urgency of this failure, we have cross-referenced this information with EPC data, which shows that 64% of failures due to insufficient insulation are already at EPC C. 27 of these properties are already on the SHDF Wave 3 programme, and the rest have been passed over to MEARS to have the insulation topped up over the next 2 financial years. The final dashboard is the Consumer Standards dashboard, which shows an improvement on our compliance position since last quarter. The team is continuing to work on larger projects that will improve our position further, such as introduction of the asset management strategy and the adoption of policies. The dashboard also shows that we are being called up for regulatory inspection as part of the regulator's standard 4-year programme. The team has provided a contextual document and evidence against consumer standards requirements to the regulator, and inspectors will spend 2 days with our team on the 29th and 30th of April. The outcome of the inspection is expected in June/July 26 and will provide a judgment from C1 to C4, C1 being highest and C4 being lowest. Cabinet is asked to note the report, and I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane, thank you. Any comments, members? Councillor Keane.
I mean, just to say well done to everyone with all the work that's going on, because these are fantastic results and the trend is all going in the right direction.
Thank you. There's no further comments. That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. We move on to item 6, which is corporate performance indicators for quarter 3. This report provides members of the Cabinet with an overview of the Council's corporate performance for the period 1st of October to the 31st of December 2025. Tables are presented setting out the latest data against each of the 5 corporate plan priorities. Where there's more than a single data set available and or it's meaningful to do so, graphs are also presented. The Council is currently monitoring 40 corporate performance indicators, CPIs, 7 on a monthly basis, 18 quarterly, 12 annually and 3 biannually. For each indicator, the expected trend or travel of direction is stated along with whether the Council is meeting that trend. Where specific targets have been set, these are stated where possible based on the reporting period. Many targets are annual, therefore performance can't be confirmed until quarter 4. To support interpretation of the data, a summary has been provided in the final column against each indicator. This provides councillors and the public with a narrative to explain the context of the performance, as the numbers alone won't always tell the full story. Cabinet should note that since publication of the report, it's been identified as part of the ongoing monitoring and scrutiny that Indicator 31, major planning applications, should have stated that it isn't meeting the expected trend. Overall, as identified within the report, while recognising there's still much work to be done, this report demonstrates the Council's making steady progress with many CPIs. I'll draw your attention to a few specific areas. You won't be surprised that I'm going to start with graffiti. In terms of graffiti, the Council has already far exceeded the annual target of 750, with 1,361 items removed by the end of quarter 3. And I'd like obviously at this stage to thank the team for their hard work, recognise their achievement, and of course we know that this is a priority for residents, visitors, officers and councillors alike. The number of beach and coast PSPO interventions this year increased by 500 and 59 fixed penalty notices were issued. Performance with our bin collections has significantly improved since the start of the year, and although recycling has reduced slightly this quarter, the rollout of the new simpler recycling scheme is expected to help us improve. In terms of housing, actions to improve living conditions have been taken in 305 homes for the year to date, far surpassing the 180 target. We've seen the number of households placed in temporary accommodation reduce, and the number of those placed outside the district has fallen to, now at 44. I think I saw a lower number earlier. Councillor White reminds me it's 39 currently. Hopefully it's going to keep going down. Impressive progress continues to be made with our housing delivery programmes too, with the pipeline beyond the 400 target. As with graffiti removal, This reflects a key service user and cabinet objective. It's also positive to note that the number of households supported by the council's sustainable energy team this quarter, which is a significant increase to the previous quarter. Details of all the council's CPIs are contained within the report, and cabinet will continue to review the progress made. This performance data will be reviewed by members of OSP in April, on the 21st of April, and I move that cabinet notes the report. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Duckworth, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Generally, this is really encouraging, very positive. Delighted to see so many successful KPIs here. And once again, very enthusiastic about the presentation. Being able to see it in this format is so helpful. It really makes a difference to what you can take in. Particularly pleased about the graffiti and the fly tipping, because obviously, as you said, Leader, these are things that residents and visitors are particularly concerned about. Delighted to see the all the housing areas, and can I say, in relation to all the other items that I'm not speaking on, well done to Councillor Whitehead, Ms Jackson and the team, because there's some really good stuff going on. I've got a couple of questions. The first one was about I noticed with fly tip clearance, we're talking about things being recorded via an app. I'm assuming that that is within the team who are involved in that, rather than an app that's available to other people, because we really did want to access an app for ordinary people to report fly tipping, as we used to have. We used to have the Fix My Street app, which was particularly useful, and we're really sorry that we don't have that anymore, because reporting on the website is much harder. Recycling, we're really looking forward to the simpler recycling system, but we do think there is a lot of confusion out there amongst residents, so I think we're going to have to be very careful with our comms on that, because a lot of residents worry in a way about that, and it's not actually people that it applies to. And finally, I wanted to try to ask about the homelessness prevented number, which seems to have, we don't seem to have met what we hoped to, and yet we've met what we hoped to in every other aspect of our housing and homelessness services. So I wonder if somebody could just explain to me why that item looks odd. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask officers if they can comment on that. I'm sure when you mentioned Miss Jackson, you meant to mention Miss O'Sullivan as well, didn't you?
I did indeed. I can't speak there.
Yeah. Can we help with the data that's been? It won't work in terms of the stream, which is the problem. So I think
turn the mic on behind you.
you need the mic on.
Stand in the corner.
So the question really is about homelessness prevention. So we do homelessness prevention activity at two stages in the process. Firstly, when somebody is in accommodation, but they're going to lose it within 56 days. And then in the first 56 days period after they've lost their accommodation, it's known as a relief period, we can also do homelessness prevention in that period as well. And those services are focused on either keeping somebody in their home, so it might be negotiating with the landlord so that they can stay, maybe helping with their rent arrears or financial advice or other advice about their tenancy, or it might be providing rent deposits or rent guarantees to help people move into a new tenancy in the private rented sector. So we've set quite a challenging target for that, and when we've had today we've had some feedback from the MHCLG that have taken a deep dive into our homelessness service here in Thanet, and our prevention service across the board is above the national average. So we're around about 50% of the cases that we deal with we can resolve at the prevention or relief stage, and nationally it's about 40%. I mean, I recognise that we haven't quite met the target that we set ourselves. We did set ourselves quite a challenging target, and we're going to continue to do that, because clearly being able to get a successful prevention outcome is better for the resident, because they're able to move into a permanent home quicker. It's also better for the council as well, because it's a cheaper solution, and we'll continue to be challenging and doing as much of that as we can.
I think in terms of what you said about the fly tipping reporting, I have some sympathy, because I find it quite difficult to manipulate the map on a mobile phone. I don't know about you. So, I mean, perhaps that's something which we'll go away and talk about a bit more. It is a bit clunky. I think in terms of the recycling, it's inevitable that there will be a level of confusion. I know there's a lot of work going on to manage that, and we think we're getting on top of it, I think, from some of the conversations we've been having, but the officers are well aware of the need to get the message out. Do you want to come in, Mr. Hummer?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'll just move to the back row again. Could you just clarify, Councillor Austin, were you talking about reporting of fly tipping, or were you talking about an app, another app? I think
I was talking about apps that we used to have, like Fix My Street, where you could could
okay.
report. As a resident, as a councillor, you could report fly tipping on the hoof much more easily than you can accessing our website on your phone.
So we don't have an app. There's something internal, a Google system that the team use internally, but there isn't an outward facing app, just the website. But the benefit of that, of course, is, and I've sort of done this myself, you see fly tipping, you can look at it and quickly see if someone else has already reported it, because there's already a star on the map. And I'm sorry, I've just been reminded that we are looking into developing better reporting tools for residents.
Okay, thank you. Members, any comments on the quarterly monitoring? Councillor Bright.
Yeah, I think this is really important, because many of the services that we talk about, we spend a lot of time talking about, are actually services that many of our residents will never experience. So the obvious things like, not obvious, but the things like graffiti and planting trees and emptying bins on time is felt by everyone across the board. And I think for us to have come in and started to make a very real difference and make very real progress is brilliant at just giving residents the confidence that the council's looking out for everyone. So I think, you see on social media, people, the one missed bin that might have been missed in a park, empty litter bin that hasn't been emptied, creates an awful lot of chat, but the stats are there, and knowing the reality that, such a high level of bins are emptied out on time and on schedule is really reassuring. So, congratulations to all of these metrics.
Anybody else? Okay, I'd like to thank Ms. Thorpe for the report, and as I say, the statistics are encouraging. That's been moved and seconded. Members, is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 7, which is the third update on the Development and Acquisitions Programme. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Tonight I have the distinct pleasure of introducing the third regular update on the progress of our Accelerated Development Programme and our Temporary Accommodation Acquisition Programme. As members will know, we wanted to commit to regular updates on where we are, not only with our Accelerated Development Programme, but also our targeted in-house temporary accommodation acquisitions. It is important that both are discussed as a whole, as both contribute to our overall aim as an administration, namely to move those in need and in temporary accommodation into long-term housing, and to ensure that those needing temporary accommodation can have that need met by the council directly, with properties within Thanet and subject to exactly the same rigorous monitoring as our general needs housing. As regards our Accelerated Development Programme, which aimed to increase the previous council average of housing production from 18 per year over the last decade to over 100 per year, our target remains to deliver at least 400 affordable homes by 2027. We have already secured a total of 294 units within the HRA programme. We have already fully completed the development or purchase of 108 units, all of which are currently occupied. Of the 39 units secured through the Local Authority Housing Fund, 22 have been completed and occupied, with 8 of these currently being used for temporary accommodation. Our overall pipeline has slightly decreased from previous updates due to movement of units into our temporary accommodation programme. This is primarily due to our unsuccessful bid for Homes England grant funding, which led to a delay and to some of the HRA units being repurposed into our temporary accommodation programme to maintain financial viability. However, we are entirely committed to increasing delivery and are actively progressing with 2 complex new schemes. Highfield Road at Ramsgate, which is a site with potential for 25 accessible units, and Eaton Place Margate, a partnership that aims to deliver approximately 65 units of accommodation. These 2 schemes bring our current total HRA programme pipeline to 384 homes, 16 away from our original target. And I would just like to say just how excited I am about those 2 developments, Highfield Road principally because it allows us to provide a very large number of accessible units, which is something that we are determined to tackle as a council, and Eaton Place allows us to create new council housing on a site where unfortunately people previously lost affordable tenancies. Our in-house temporary accommodation programme, as you know, was brought forward to not only tackle the issue of families being placed out of area, but also to create what I refer to as a virtuous circle. Namely, funding being invested within the council to support residents that then stays within the council rather than moving to external providers, so that we can not only reduce temporary accommodation costs, but also continue to fund temporary accommodation internally and support the general fund via income. Previously, temporary accommodation put a huge strain on our general fund. That strain still exists, but it is reducing the more that we take on in-house projects, as the majority of our in-house temporary accommodation produce surplus for the general fund within 1 to 3 years, actively creating funding rather than existing in a state of permanent loss as we did previously. It will take a while for us to fully see the impact of the entire programme, but we are already seeing improvements. However, the need for temporary accommodation continues to put pressure on our resources. As of February the 2nd, we had 215 households in TA, with 39 of those placed outside the district. This, however, compares to 309 households in TA at the same time last year, with our highest number out of area previously standing at 169. To address both social and financial needs, this administration approved an accelerated programme in December 2024 to acquire a further 170 units of TA. This programme is funded through 46.8 million of general fund prudential borrowing over the next few financial years, specifically targeting schemes that will generate a long-term revenue savings compared to other forms of TA. We are already close to 100 of the 170 homes acquired specifically for in-house TA, and each acquisition makes a dramatic difference to both the lives of our residents and the financial future of the council. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Seconder, Councillor? Are you seconded, Councillor Allen? You got in before I'd even asked. But clearly keen. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I'd like to thank Ashley Jackson and all those who have contributed to this 3rd acquisitions report, and especially for the tables presented for both the Housing Review Account Programme and the Temporary Accommodation Programme. These visual representations enable members to see clearly the number of properties secured or acquired, along with details of the funding involved and timings for occupation. I'm aware that the earlier TA acquisitions are managed by a person on site for at least part of each day, providing support for individuals and families who may be suffering from the effects of having been made homeless and may have complex needs. The TA table shows that a good deal of the later acquisitions are single units in various Thanet locations, and I'm curious to know how these families are currently being supported and how they will be in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford, and apologies, I'm not in my usual seat, so it's quite hard for me to see you right now. So the earlier accommodation blocks were managed in the way that they were specifically because they are blocks, as in we own everything within that block. So not only does it allow us to provide a significant amount of support, but it's also a very efficient way for us to support tenants and manage the block as a whole, because it's a large number of our tenants in one place. If we're thinking of Foy, for instance, we've got 8. So later temporary accommodation acquisitions, it's less that we're not considering support needs and more that if we're not managing an entire block, the support can come via the families individually rather than day-to-day management within those blocks. So the support is still very much there, both in terms of individual families, housing officers and support on site, but it's a very different dynamic than managing individual blocks. The vast majority of those, unfortunately, who come into our homelessness service are those who simply need accommodation. We do work, as you're aware, with individuals with very, very complex needs. And so services like the RISE service or Foy House, in terms of the monitoring, those provide a different level of support. But the vast majority of the residents coming through are simply people who need a home, who have been maintaining a home previously, who have done that successfully, but due to Section 21 or homelessness or external pressures have lost that home. So for a lot of the residents who come through, it's very important to them to be able to maintain that normality and just be a household or a family unit where they are. So we'll be discussing the temporary accommodation policy later. That also covers some of the steps that we're taking to try and make life as normal as possible for those who move into temporary accommodation. I would like to say thank you and echo what you say in relation to housing and also finance, who've enabled a lot of this. There's been a huge amount of work across departments to enable this. I know I always say I couldn't be prouder of housing, but today, especially after the deep dive, I very, very much am. Because they've done an extraordinary job for this community and deserve a huge amount of praise for it. I'm going to hand over to Ash, just so that she can fill in any gaps that I've left around support or anything similar.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add that we reconfigured the housing options team last year to include new temporary accommodation officers who support households. So the TLS team look after the temporary accommodation properties and we support the people. So that's how it's worked now. We have 3 officers who go out to the households out of the area as well. I think she's been to every single one and goes like on a fortnightly basis. But yeah, with the individual households are looked after by the temporary accommodation teams in the housing options, whereas the properties are looked after by Sally's team.
Members. Yeah, I think the report is really good news, and I think it is also important that we put this information in front of the public and the council on this cycle so that everyone can see the progress that we're making. And, you know, we should celebrate the achievements. And I think the biggest single achievement reported in here is the number of people accommodated out of area dropping to 39. I think that's a fantastic achievement and great credit to the officers. And it's something certainly was recognised by the reps from MHCLG in the deep dive this morning, which I was also pleased to attend. It was a very positive session and validation for the work that's been done in the area that they were there to talk to us about. Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on now to item 8, which is the Foundation's Strategic Authority for Kent and Medway. So this report provides the background for Cabinet to decide whether TDC should submit an expression of interest for a foundation strategic authority for Kent and Medway. It's in response to a letter sent to council leaders, all mayors and all chief executives by MHCLG on the 12th of February, inviting EOIs from relevant local authorities, including Kent and Medway. I should say that all of the districts of Kent and Medway are supportive of what's been asked of them here. The only local authority in Kent which is not supporting a foundation strategic authority at this stage is Kent County Council. The reason they're not supporting it is that they think there should be one council, which is inconsistent with the model of a foundation strategic authority, which is made up of more than one council. So in effect, they think all the powers should be devolved to them, and that they should take over Medway. But I think, notwithstanding that, the general view is that we want this devolution, that there was general disappointment that we weren't included in the original proposals to devolve, to set up an elected mayor. This is a lower tier of offer, but it is the start of a process and will enable Kent authorities to develop a future structure which will incorporate more devolution, more power and hopefully more money. So I'd read the recommendations, which are to note the invitation from MHCLG, note the background and context for consideration of the invitation, to support the principle of devolution by means of the creation of a foundation strategic authority for the Kent and Medway region, agree that the Leader of the Council writes to MHCLG prior to the 20th of March 2026, tomorrow, formally submitting an expression of interest on behalf of Thanet in relation to the creation of an FSA, and agree that the Leader and Chief Executive enter into preliminary negotiations in relation to the development of proposals in respect to the creation of an FSA. I move the recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane, thank you. Speaking on the 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. You'll be possibly surprised, and hopefully not, to hear that this is incredibly welcome, I believe. It's an important step, and thank you for your comment about being disappointed about us not moving faster to a mayoral system, because devolution is about giving a voice to the people and making sure that localism is brought into place. So, but I do see, because again, we've previously expressed concerns that there's not enough talk about devolution and too much about LGR. So I'd just like to put on the record that this is extremely welcome. Do we have, I don't know if there's an estimated time frame before the foundation, but obviously the foundation strategic authority needs to be formed immediate or as soon as possible. Is there a sort of forecast time frame before it would move on to a mayoral system? But in the meantime, I think this is a cause for quite a lot of faith, actually, because it seems we're not just going to be lumbered with super districts. We will have that strategic authority, which is a step towards accountability to the electorate. That obviously a directly elected mayor is the icing on the cake there, but I do believe this to be a step in the right direction and extremely welcome, as I say. But do you have any idea? And that's, I know the answer is probably how long's a piece of string, but worth asking.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I think that the assumption is that the Foundation Strategic Authority will be set up in 2028, in line with the vesting of the new unitary authorities, and some work would obviously be done in the meantime on what that would look like. I think in terms of moving on to later stages of devolution, the government sort of talked about that in terms of the maturity of the existing structure, so I think they would want to see how it was working in practice, and then move on to the later stages. So I don't think you can actually say it would happen in this year or in a particular year, but I think the government wants to have one set of arrangements across England, so it would make sense that it would want to move forward as quickly as reasonably possible. I think the reason why we're now dealing with these kinds of arrangements is because basically the government bit off more than it could chew in the first place, and hadn't it started off looking at devolution when it perhaps should have started off looking at local government reorganisation, and the latter should have been the precursor to the former, basically, which it eventually came to understand, and that's why we are now, where we are now. Certainly it was my view that local government reorganisation was an essential component of it and needed to come first. Members, any comments? Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Because KCC don't like it, then I think we should snap it up. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bright.
It's a good point. Look, I think this is a great opportunity, and I think, you know, we can't achieve. Kent is a massive geographical area, and we can't achieve anything unless we've got objectives, and you can't achieve those objectives unless you've got a strategy. So I think having a system in place that really understands Kent, understands that on the one hand we are feeding workers into the City of London who live in the kind of leafy towns like Sevenoaks, but at the same time we're the gateway to Europe and have some high areas of deprivation. Having someone that understands that and that can actually lean into it and see the opportunity of this county is fantastic. So I'm really supportive of this, and I hope whoever forms that strategic authority has a suitably large vision and imagination.
Okay. Members, any other comments? No. That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 9, which is temporary accommodation policy. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. This report outlines our new temporary accommodation policy, our commitment to placing residents within district wherever possible, and ensuring that those with pets are supported as much as possible when facing homelessness. Our temporary accommodation policy sets out our approach to the placement of homeless households in TA, both within our in-house service and through external providers. The last week has brought very welcome news, with Thanet topping the table of all Kent authorities for a reduction in TA placements by a very significant margin, and with us managing to return 78% of those who had been placed outside Thanet. We aim to reach 100% within the next year. These approaches are part of our new holistic approach to temporary accommodation, and the investment we have made in it, both in terms of staffing and in terms of purchases for our in-house TA, all of which is located in Thanet, to keep people close to home. We now have 215 households in temporary accommodation, in comparison with 309 at this time last year, and we now have 39 households out of area as compared to 169 when we began our in-house investment programme. Families placed out of area face significant challenges in terms of support. Our officers also face challenges in terms of being able to effectively support where external providers and out of area placements are used. So the overall move to in-house accommodation in Thanet, where households can, where possible, keep their pets with them, is infinitely healthier for our residents and our staff and our communities. This temporary accommodation policy marks the first point where our pet policy for our tenant and leaseholder policy aligns with our temporary accommodation policy. Wherever possible, we will give permission for pets to be housed with their household in TA, in line with the restrictions already within our tenant and leaseholder policy for our in-house temporary accommodation. Facing homelessness is by far one of the most stressful things anyone can go through. It is our job to reduce as much stress as possible for households going through this process, and ensuring that all family members can stay together is a huge part of this. The recommendations to Cabinet are that Cabinet endorse and Thanet District Council adopt the amended temporary accommodation policy, and that the policy be reviewed on an annual basis by officers and significant changes be reconsidered by Cabinet, but with minor changes to be signed off by the Head of Housing and Planning in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Duckworth, thank you. Members. Councillor Alban.
I think this is really important, and when you are dealing with caseworker, people being dragged out of area and etc., you know, this kind of policy is worth its weight in gold, to be quite honest. And I'm just pleased to see that when it went through, so I'm a bit close to the mic. When it went through overview and scrutiny, they had no difficulty with it and didn't make any recommendations. So I fully support this, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bright.
I was I saw earlier, I think it was on social media, the table that compares our performance in temporary accommodation to the other districts in Kent, and I was reminded of when we were talking about local government reorganisation earlier on, late last year, and we looked at the difference in terms of the resources at different councils' disposals. And I think in second place behind Thanet was Sevenoaks. And when you think back at the size of their reserves and the size of their tax base, it's an incredible achievement that we have come out on the top of that particular table, and it's so valuable for residents. On the pet policy, I welcome it, despite the fact that I spent my wedding anniversary waiting for Councillor Joanne Bright, who was in A&E for the second time, having been attacked by our cat. I do understand how important for people's mental health and, pets are. They are a member of the family, which is why she's still with us. Not just Joanne. I meant the cat. He's still with us, but it is really important. I'll shut up now. But it's fantastic.
Is the cat?
Thank you for that one, Councillor Bright. Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. Moving on to item 10, which is the adoption of 5 new policies and revised tenant and leaseholder services policy. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to recommend the adoption and publication of 5 new policies and the revision of 1 existing policy for the tenant and leaseholder services. These policies clarify expectations for all stakeholders, ensure the service operates in full compliance with new legislation, regulatory standards, and addresses identified operational gaps. Our 5 new policies are our scooter policy, to prioritise fire safety, providing clear guidelines on the ownership, storage and charging of mobility scooters. Our pet policy, to balance the benefits of pet ownership with the need to prevent nuisance and antisocial behaviour in the community. Our good neighbour policy, which complements our antisocial behaviour policy by outlining an approach to tackling nuisance behaviour that falls outside of the ASB classification, with a focus on respect and tolerance. Our hate crime policy, which provides a clear statement of the Council's approach to tackling hate crime and aims to resolve incidents before they escalate. Our domestic abuse policy, which has been developed in line with Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance guidance and the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, detailing how we will respond to cases involving council tenants. The one policy that has been revised is our fire risk assessment policy. Significant changes include the addition of how we must manage personal emergency evacuation plans in our high-risk buildings in response to new legislation and the Building Safety Act 2022. These policies have been developed by frontline officers and have also been subject to consultation with the Thanet Tenant and Leaseholder Group and the Housing Cabinet Advisory Group. The domestic abuse policy also benefited from significant contributions from the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance and Oasis. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead. The introduction of the new policies is commendable in that the purpose of each is to improve the lives of our residents. However, I believe that the enforcement of some of the policies will be very challenging and require specialist handling, and ask who will be responsible for carrying out this work.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. You're right, there are elements to this that will be quite difficult, but as we've discussed, I think, at the Housing CAG and at the Tenant and Leaseholder Group, all of the issues, especially surrounding the use of mobility devices and the risks of lithium batteries especially, are things that need to be tackled across agency. So we will be involving social services, occupational therapy to work out what people's physical needs are, involving allocations if people need to move properties because they definitely need a device that can't be accommodated safely within a larger block. All of this will be done not only cross-department, but also cross-working with Kent County Council and with health and medical services. But it is something, It's something that has to be very, very carefully handled. Simultaneously, I think we're all aware of how significant the risks are, especially in relation to lithium batteries and what can happen in shared blocks where something goes wrong with those. And we have in fact had one of those cases in the last week, thankfully with nobody severely harmed. But the fact that one can go up within 2 minutes with individuals having no way of exiting the building once that point has been reached is something that's a significant part of managing fire safety risks. So they're things that we have to bring forward, but we do have to be very careful in terms of how we manage it so that we're supporting residents with their mobility needs at the same time. I'm happy to hand over to Mrs. Sullivan if she would like to add anything else.
Hi. So no, Helen pretty much covered everything that I would have covered. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. It will be our frontline officers that take the initial action, though, of course. They will be out there monitoring where the scooters are and putting the notices on and speaking to the residents in the first instance to give them the advice and support that they need. That's it.
Members, any comments? Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Leader. Just really pleased to see the domestic abuse policy in here. I think this is a really comprehensive and sensitive policy, so I really welcome that and the multi-agency working that it embraces.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 11, which is the lease for radars placed at the Port of Ramsgate. The report proposes the council enter into lease negotiations with a reputable marine radar manufacturer for land at the port. Currently, the company tests radars on the roof of their office near London. However, as they are maritime radars, they would like a test location in the marine environment to fully test their equipment. The commercial operator wishes to use 1,000 square metres of land at the port to establish a testing facility for their radars. The work will include building a radar mast and operating it at test targets around the coastline. The prospective location is unique due to its constrained shape and size. It's positioned at the extreme southeastern corner of the port, between an existing long-term tenant and the sea. The council will generate income from this currently unusable piece of port land. The land will require some remedial works to make it lettable, but this can be capitalised and paid for from the future income the council will receive from the new letting. While a previous December 2025 decision focused on short-term income through leases and licences of 1 to 4 years, this specific opportunity requires a longer-term commitment of at least 7 years due to the significant capital investment required by the operator. The lease will be based on commercial market terms and is subject to satisfactory financial and legal due diligence. A primary objective of the Port of Ramsgate Future Delivery Project is to end the current revenue deficit and establish long-term financial viability. The council anticipates approximately £5,000 in costs for professional valuations and legal surveying work, which will be offset by the lease income. The Cabinet is asked to agree the head of property should negotiate a lease of at least 7 years for the specified land at the port and finalise lease terms and agree the lease following the required due diligence checks. And speaking, can I have a seconder, please? I'll move that. Get ahead of myself. Councillor Alban. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Wing.
Thank you. It's just a query really, because I sort of generally support this. I first of all looked at what 1,000 square metres roughly looked like, and I always need to put stuff into sports size pitches because then I can visualise it. And it's the size of a mugger, a multi-use games area, or a 6-a-side football pitch. So it's not a particularly big area of land, is it? And the thing that worries me is as when we buy housing, we see a document that comes forward where we actually see at what point we break even. And I think I heard, and I wasn't going to go back through that overview and scrutiny meeting, that we need to spend 90k on doing something to that area of land. Did I hear that correctly? Was it 90,000 was a figure? It seemed an awful lot. So I'm now thinking I made it up in my head.
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Humber because he probably knows more about that figure than I do, because I wasn't at that part of the OSP meeting.
Thank you, Leader. So there will be costs, and I think it will be high tens of thousands in order to get that site ready for use. But there's a really good reason for using that site. It's so that it doesn't impact upon the wider port site for future development. This is for a radar facility. It's the perfect location because it's closest to the sea. It's sort of near the Brett site and right on the seaward side. So it gives sort of uninterrupted views of the sea, which is exactly what you need for this type of opportunity. So it's worth that work to get that site ready for this use.
I agree with all that. I mean, it's probably the most isolated part of that couldn't really be used for anything else. So it is a good use. But what I think I would certainly like to see as a member, and I'm sure other members would, when we buy the houses we've bought, we always get that document that tells us when we're breaking even. And I possibly, we can't see the commercial sensitivity around how much the radar people will be paying, but it could be a document which is displayed in percentages rather than a cash figure. So is there any chance we could see a document when there is an agreement that shows us exactly when we will break even? So year one, 20% of what we've laid out might be paid. Year two, 30% might be paid. We get that for housing in financial figures, but I would just like to see when we actually break even and break into profit, because there is some initial outlay for us.
Well, I'll let you come in, Mr. Humber, but I mean, I would say that when we buy a property, that's a transaction which is a matter of record anyway. So that information's in the public domain. I think when you're dealing with a commercial operator, it's a slightly different situation, but I'll let Mr. Humber deal with that.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I mean, what we're doing here, or what the proposal is to sort of delegate to the head of property to do that negotiation. And obviously, it's important that economically that transaction stacks up, and that the repayment period for any investment is suitably short, that this is still an opportunity with merit. Otherwise, it should fall. It shouldn't go ahead. So, I mean, to do that, I think would be, and again, I'll probably hand back to the leader on it, but to do that would be introducing another stage in this process rather than delegating that authority to the head of property to do.
I also think if the disposal didn't represent best value under section 123, then we wouldn't be able to enter into it anyway, and nobody would be more aware of that than the head of property. So I think we understand what you're asking, Councillor Wing, but I don't think you're going to get an answer here, but certainly something we can go away and think about. I think that's probably the best that we can do as far as this evening. But we're not in the business of entering into transactions which are not financially advantageous for the council. So I think that will be our objective. Members, any comments on radar? Okay. That's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 12, which is the Thanet Regeneration Programme procurement decisions, which isn't Councillor Whitehead, it's Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Leader. The report seeks Cabinet approval to transition the procurement strategies for the Green Campus, Pier Yard and Broad Street projects which form part of the Thanet Regeneration Programme. Specifically, the recommendation is to move from the previously agreed utilisation of the SCAPE framework, which was for the Green Campus and Pier Yard, and the London Construction Programme Dynamic Purchasing System proposed for Broad Street, to a new, alternative, compliant, competitive tendering process. This is a technical decision required on the basis of already approved projects, rather than a decision about the future delivery of the projects. The previously agreed contractual arrangements have a break clause post the design stages. The work to date is therefore still part of the project's delivery process. This strategic change is necessitated by evolving project delivery factors and is designed to maximise value for money, while maintaining the momentum required for the successful, affordable and timely delivery of the Thanet Regeneration Programme. It is worth noting that the team is engaging external specialist resources to support the procurement exercises for these projects. This will add capacity to support the speed and timeliness of the procurement process. This procurement activity will be in line with the Council's contract procedure rules and delegated authority framework, with the different works contracts awarded on the basis of successful and compliant tenders. Cabinet is asked to approve the following. 1. Authorise the Council to change its procurement approach for the works to be undertaken at Green Campus and Pier Yard, part of the Thanet regeneration programme, from the previously agreed utilisation of SCAPE framework to an alternative compliant procurement route. 2. Authorise the Council to change its procurement approach for the works to be undertaken at Broad Street, part of the Thanet regeneration programme, from the previously agreed utilisation of the London Construction Programme dynamic purchasing system to an alternative compliant procurement route. To note that external specialist resources are being procured to lead the procurement exercises for these projects. 4. Authorises the letting of the different works contracts on the basis of successful and compliant tenders as per the Council's contract procedure rules and delegated authority framework.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Keane, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Leader. Again, fairly straightforward question because we've had conversations with officers about where we are with this. I think we've painted ourselves into an absolute corner, and if any of these projects fails, then it has it mentions in the report that it would have significant impact on our funding and reserves. It's a massive, massive threat to us, I believe. So by making this change, is it going to impact on the time frame, timescales and deliverability of any of these projects? Because the Green Campus in particular, we seem to be we seem to take one step forward and two back, it seems. The Pier Yard is already massively shrunken, so I don't know if we've had to cover any of the costs of the area, the section of that isn't going ahead with the highways improvements. But are we totally happy, or do you have any mitigation strategy for if any of these projects proves not to be deliverable because of its impact on our reserves?
Councillor Duckworth.
This change is in order to speed things up, so I don't think there's anything to worry about, but I'll just check with Ms. Askew.
Sorry. Okay, so a couple of points. I think the this procurement exercise will hopefully speed up all of the projects through the next stages. Because we're using external support, that hopefully won't have too much of an impact on the timescales. The Green Campus has been moving forward all through this period. It's currently in for planning committee, so we're waiting for the date for planning committee. Hopefully it's going to be the next one for approvals on the planning process. We're also starting to put together an event that we're going to hopefully hold in May, and obviously we had the approvals at a previous cabinet meeting to start to work towards identifying a third party operator. So all of those kind of three things are all coming in together. The Pier Yard scheme remains at the budget that it has been when it was within the highways scheme. We're currently, I think, at REBA stage 3, and we'll be working through the cost reports. Because there is an element of contingency sat within the programme, that will allow that scheme to be at a greater level of design. But at the moment, we're reporting on the information that we have to hand. The mitigation is that we are going through this process. So we were faced with a risk around a scheme that wasn't providing value for money and was undeliverable within the funding envelope. So the mitigation was to utilise the position we're currently in terms of the contract, which is a design and build. We finalised the design element, which allows us to come out of that contract to identify construction companies that will deliver it within a funding envelope that we deem to be value for money. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I am disappointed in relation to the highway scheme, which is not going to be carried out, because I thought it. My own view is I think it would have made a big difference, and that includes the pier yard, because I think without it it's going to be difficult. However, the overall view of this report and the recommendations are sound, in my opinion. So I'm quite happy with it, apart from the pier yard and the highway.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Alban. I think that probably belongs under item 13 rather than this item, which is about procurement on the.
I shall restate it again.
On the projects, but I think we understand your sentiments. I think Councillor Davies makes a good point about the risk of abortive costs, but they are abortive costs, and mitigating the risk is done by delivering the scheme. All the schemes, and anything which becomes a threat to that is the problem. The costs are there. That money's been spent, and that money could fall onto our revenue budget if we don't proceed with the schemes. So I think that it's important everybody understands that, and I think we're doing everything that we can, and in the full expectation that the schemes are going to be delivered. Members, any further comments? No, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. We move on to item 13, which is the Thanet Regeneration Programme, with Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Leader. It's great to once again be able to bring a reports cabinet with a programme-wide update on the projects in Margate and Ramsgate that form part of the Thanet Regeneration Programme. I'd like to thank Ms Askew, as we wouldn't have got this far without her capabilities and expertise. The information provided in the report include a project-by-project overview of the schemes with high-level timelines for each project at Annex 1 and a financial update for the programme in Annex 2. This helps to show where funding has been spent and what is remaining to deliver the projects. Project teams continue to engage with stakeholders, provide project updates on our website and send out regular update newsletters to people signed up for information. Some key project updates include the news that we've engaged a contractor for the design and build of the Margate Skate Park. The Newington project is in the last stages of practical completion and is being prepared to hand back to the Newington Community Centre Association, who we intend to continue to work with to support their long-term sustainability. The marketing process for the Clockhouse Cafe has been published, and despite unveiling many unforeseen challenges, the works at the Clockhouse project continue through its refurbishment. We've held some engagement events to help inform what the residents of Ramsgate would like to see in the building, to help inform its design. We've got a number of schemes with applications submitted for planning and listed building consent decisions. Following its planning approval recently, the procurement documents for the Walpole Bay Beach facilities have been published. We hosted a great engagement event for the Theatre Royal with a huge amount of support from all those who visited and engaged online through Your Voice Thanet. We understand that members of the Ramsgate community remain concerned about the impact of removing the highway scheme, and officers have agreed to review budgets as the construction costs for the Green Campus, Pier Yard and Broad Street come in, to understand availability of funds. These are important projects for Ramsgate, helping to create jobs and improve footfall and public realm. We remain committed to providing updates to help keep people informed as we move through the delivery phase for our projects. I recommend that Cabinet note the progress achieved in the delivery of the approved Thanet Regeneration Programme projects in this report, refer this report to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel, and subsequently consider any recommendations made by the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Duckworth. It's great to see progress across the board on these projects, and it's also, I'm back to format again, great to see a report in this format that's easy to understand and that goes into a fair amount of detail about where we are with things, and uses the red, amber, green system, but explains to us in detail where the sticking points might be with some of the projects, etc. Really, really helpful. So thank you very much to all involved in that. Very good to see to be able to visit the Theatre Royal, to be able to visit the Margate Digital Campus and have a look at what's happening with Winter Gardens, etc. I'm really looking forward to being able to go and visit the Digital Campus and see what they're going to be doing there as well. All looks very exciting, really positive seeing this moving forward. Obviously, what I'm going to say as a Ramsgate councillor is we're terribly disappointed about the road scheme. We're really grateful to Councillor Green for raising this again with the board, and very grateful to the board for being willing to have another look at this, because it really is crucial to the Ramsgate schemes that this works, and we have many residents, traders, businesses, visitor attractions, etc., who feel really strongly that we need to do something about the situation with the road, and we really thought this was the answer, and some version of that is really very much needed in Ramsgate. Other than that, we're happy with the how progress with things, and we're looking forward to seeing what happens. Thank you.
Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. And yes, we, as it says in the introduction, we will look at the road scheme. It will never be what we wanted in the first place, because we can't afford to sign ourselves up to having somebody there 24 hours a day or whatever. But yeah, if there is any money left, we can look again.
Let's come in, Ms. Askew.
I think just to follow on from what Councillor Duckworth was saying, the offer to the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board was, as we get further along with the other schemes and we understand the costs that are associated with them, we can revisit the contingency budget within the programme. We will also need to engage with the County Council to understand exactly what the parameters are around what changes can be made that don't impact on the concerns and issues that were raised with us before, because I understand that conversations have had between Ramsgate Town Council and an officer of Kent County Council, but there were a number of meetings and discussions that were being had at that time with a variety of representatives at County Council at all levels, and so not all of that information may have been available to all of those officers, and so we would need to understand, because the issue is about a safety audit, and any changes, the understanding was any changes made within that highway would impact the safety around that roundabout. So even if the roundabout came out of any changes to the road, the safety audit is not just within the zone where the change is made, it's wider than that. So we would need to understand, before initiating any further design work, what that safety audit would need to take into account, and if it would be impacted by that roundabout and vehicle movement from Military Road. So they were the offers that were made at the board, and the board supported, and they will all come back through our engagement process at the board, who's obviously not a decision maker, but part of the kind of engagement activity we do within the programme, and any decisions around that will have to come through the cabinet process, because it will be changing a programme and previous decisions made.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Councillor Alban.
Yeah, just on this last point, in relation to whether there are any monies left over from what other parts of the schemes are done, could that money be guaranteed for the highway works?
I'm going to let Ms Askew comment on that.
I think it would be really difficult for me to make that guarantee now without knowing either how much money is available in the pot at the end of this process and or the actual cost for the scheme's delivery. So originally the highway scheme only had I think it was 1.1 million from the Future High Street Fund, and the Levelling Up Fund actually bolstered that part of the scheme because it was a greater value than originally expected. So it will have quite significant costs, even taking out the roundabout. So I wouldn't want to provide any guarantee until we had a kind of high level costing indication of what elements of the scheme would be. The challenge is that then that becomes a revenue implication if the scheme can't be taken forward if the budget available is not enough. But what I can say is that as we work through these projects and we understand the level of contingency that remains within the programme, we will look at all of the options available to improve the movement of people between the harbour and into the high street. And if there are other smaller scale interventions that aren't necessarily highway interventions, so we will look at that, and the team will start to pick that up as we move further along with the kind of costs that come forward.
Yeah, just before you come back, Councillor Alban, I mean, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this cabinet is actually the decision maker. So it's not that we need assurances from officers about where money will go, because if we don't like where the money's going, we can change that.
I totally understand that, Leader, but I just wanted to get some kind of answer. So all I would ask, therefore, is we give it a high and due consideration, Chair, for the money to be spent. Thank you.
I think we absolutely understand the appetite for highways improvements in that area, but it will be the art of the possible, both in terms of what we can do in conjunction with KCC and what we can do in terms of the money that's available. But I'm sure we're going to have this discussion again, and as I say, ultimately any decisions are for Cabinet to make. So,
indeed they are.
Okay, is there any further discussion? No. That has been moved and seconded, Cabinet. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 14, which is the Warm Homes Local Grant, and we go back to Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. You can do it if you want.
I'll do
it. This report seeks approval for the formal adoption of the Warm Homes Local Grant Policy 2026. This policy establishes a clear framework for prioritising which applicants will receive funding in years 2 and 3 of the project. This is essential as the Council currently has a sizable waiting list of over 261 applicants. This policy is directly aligned with our corporate plan 24-28, specifically our commitments to deliver the housing we need and to protect our environment. By improving home energy efficiency, we are not only working towards our 2030 net zero target, but also ensuring that our residents have high quality, sustainable places to live. Our district faces a significant challenge. 14% of Thanet households are classified as fuel poor. This is the highest proportion in Kent. To meet this, our home energy team has been working at an exceptional pace. In Q3 of 25-26 alone, the team supported 485 households with energy advice and assistance. Following the support of 25 households in year 1, our remaining £1,075,000 budget will cover roughly 70 further retrofits. To manage this limited resource fairly, we recommend the formal adoption of this policy for several key reasons. Firstly, transparency and fairness. It moves us away from a first-come, first-served approach towards a priority matrix. This ensures that the allocation process is understandable and directed towards those in the greatest need. Prioritising the vulnerable. The matrix scores applicants based on vulnerabilities such as age, low income and long-term health conditions. This aligns with our priorities as an administration. Landlord standards. Crucially, this policy reinforces the EPC requirements for landlords set out in this year's Warm Homes Plan. By ensuring private rented properties meet these energy standards, we are protecting tenants from rising costs and poor living conditions. Risk mitigation. By centralising the process into an internal triage system, the Council maintains strict control over the remaining budget. Sticking to a first-come, first-served basis is no longer viable. It risks neglecting our most vulnerable residents in favour of lower-need households, which is an ineffective use of our limited funding. In summary, this policy ensures that our resources have the greatest impact, supporting our statutory fuel poverty targets and our broader vision for a thriving green Thanet. Cabinet is being asked to approve the adoption of the Warm Homes Local Grant Policy 2026 to help the allocation of funding for years 2 and 3 of the scheme. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Alban, thank you. I think this issue moves up the agenda further in the light of events in the Middle East, because obviously there is a real threat that energy prices are going to go even higher in the future. So welcome this, and I think it's important that we have a transparent system of prioritisation in terms of these grants, which this provides. Members, any comments? Councillor Keane, I think.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I think this is absolutely the right way to go, to sort of do it on the level of need rather than just the number on the waiting list for it. In 3.4, it says about the possibility of councils, if they've handed back their grant, we'd be able to get more funding. Is that a likelihood at all? It seems unlikely to me, but I was just curious to see it in there. Thank you.
I can't see that we are likely to hand back any funding, but I'm happy to hand over in case somebody else thinks that is likely.
No, we won't hand any funding back, but we'll have what they're handing back.
No, that's what I mean. Is anyone else likely to hand
Absolutely,
it back?
yeah, because no one's really in the position that we are.
Oh, right.
Not many, certainly none of our neighbours have home energy teams like we do, or even doing this. So, we are anticipating that we will get what they're handing back. We'll apply for what they're handing back.
Good news. Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just a question on 3.5 and relation to the bans and relating to the figure of 16,000 for £16,000 of our savings above and below, and just where's the 16,000 come from? What is that figure? What's it based on? Is it based on anything, or is it just, I take it is and not just plucked out of the air? So I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's in line with the housing benefit and the DFG figures. It's just the 16,000 is the basic cut-off.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Understand now.
Members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 15, which is update on the purchase of 85 homes from BDW Trading Limited, Spitfire Green Phase 3.2.
Got 3 to go.
Thank you, Leader. Following 2 previous successful phases of acquisitions from BDW Trading Limited, which delivered a total of 41 affordable rented council homes, Cabinet approved a 3rd phase of an additional 137 homes in September 2024. It was agreed with BDW to split Phase 3 into 2 sub-phases, 3.1 for 52 homes and Phase 3.2 for the remaining 85 homes. Phase 3.1 was approved at Cabinet in December 2024 and the homes are currently under construction and going well. This report provides an update on Phase 3.2 to acquire the remaining 85 homes. The report sets out details of the proposed funding arrangements. The Council continues to progress with the acquisition of the remaining 85 using our Accelerated Housing Programme capital budget, which was approved in October 2023. Of the 85 units to be purchased, 36 are now designated for our temporary accommodation programme, 17 are designated for the Local Authority Housing Fund, and 32 are designated for the Housing Revenue Account. The letting of these homes in accordance with the council's allocations policy and any subsequent local lettings plan at an affordable rent are set out in the council's tenancy strategy. Homes in the temporary accommodation programme will be let to households for whom the council has a statutory homelessness duty to provide accommodation. Every one of these acquisitions is far more than a property. They are homes, and they are utterly essential for the health and long-term well-being of our residents. To remind on the recommendations, we are agreeing the spread of units across temporary accommodation, local authority housing fund, and our housing revenue account, and the letting of these homes in accordance with the council's allocations policy and LLPs at an affordable rent as set out in our council tenancy strategy. Homes in the temporary accommodation programme are only to be let to households for whom the council has a statutory homelessness duty to provide accommodation. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane, thank you. Members? No? Councillor Bright?
Yeah, I think obviously this is great news, and I agree with the spread, but I just wanted to focus on what Councillor Whitehead said about every one of these houses is more than just a kind of number on a spreadsheet. It becomes someone's home. And we've talked about, and I know I've talked in this chamber a lot about the ancillary benefits that safe and secure housing has. If you're going to be cold about it, just the cost of, the lack of cost to the NHS, the lack of cost to benefits through, greater productivity as people that have grown up in secure housing bring to the economy. So I think this is just another great example of some of the amazing work that we're doing as a council.
Indeed.
Did you want to reply to that, Councillor Wade? You look like you do.
If that's okay. Sorry, I'm looking horribly expectant. Yeah, I thoroughly agree with what Councillor Bright has said. I know I probably say it far too often, but as far as I'm concerned, health is very much housing, and housing is health. If we get housing right, it supports our residents in so many different ways, and it enables us to support people in all areas of their lives. It provides stability, it provides warmth, it provides, especially in relation to our newer acquisitions, it provides properties that are going to be sustainable in terms of long-term costs. They're going to be affordable. So they are very, very much more than just properties. This is something that's going to make a dramatic difference either in people's lives in terms of bringing them back into area with the ones that we're going to use for temporary accommodation, or in terms of providing permanent homes for people so that we can create a settled community. And I think it's very special that we're able to do that. And I think it's incredibly important that we're taking these steps.
Thank you. And it's also good that we've got these different routes to acquire the properties so that we're not just dependent on the Homes England grant or the original way of taking this forward.
On that note, I would like to say thank you very much, not only to housing, but also to finance, because it's disappointing that the grant didn't come forward, but the fact that we have officers who are this creative and who understand the processes as well as they do means that we are able to still produce what we need to, and we're able to find ways to ensure that the housing that we need to acquire, we acquire. If we didn't have cross-departmental working the way we do, that would be much harder. Thank you.
Okay, members, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to the acquisition of 7 homes at Westwood Point for temporary accommodation. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval to acquire 7 further homes for the Council's Accelerated Temporary Accommodation Programme. These homes, to be constructed by Vistry, will add to the growing number of properties that the Council is using in the Thanet district, benefiting those who require urgent accommodation. These 7 homes are at Westwood Point, where members will recall the council has already secured 34 properties for both TA use and through local authority housing fund monies. As with the previous item, I cannot overstate the importance of acquiring these properties. Each one is a route home for local residents and a pathway to security for those who need it the most. Cabinet is being asked to agree that the council progresses with the acquisition of the 7 new affordable homes being built by Vistry as part of the accelerated temporary accommodation programme agreed by Cabinet in December 2024, and that the letting of these homes will be in accordance with the council's temporary accommodation allocation policy as approved by Cabinet in July 2024. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Alban? Yeah. Members, any discussion? Okay, that one's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 17, which is the biodiversity duty and biodiversity net gain report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. Under the biodiversity duty, the council is required to report on progress in relation to the duty and its biodiversity activities. The new enhanced duty came into force in 2023. In January 2024, the council published a first considerations report providing an audit of our biodiversity actions and setting out the potential for the council to implement new actions to support biodiversity. The first statutory duty report was submitted in August 2025. This Cabinet report relates to the publication of the second duty report, which will be submitted to DEFRA. The duty report is attached as Annex 1 and sets out the significant progress made in embedding biodiversity considerations across council functions and the compliance with the statutory biodiversity duty and biodiversity net gain obligations. It identifies a range of future proposed actions from 2026 through to 2031, also outlined in Section 3 of the Cabinet report, which include establishing clear and measurable biodiversity objectives, strengthening staff awareness and training, and continuing to enhance land and asset management for biodiversity outcomes. The progress made to date is the result of contributions from officers and service across the whole council, and all should be commended. It is recommended that Cabinet note the significant progress made in embedding biodiversity considerations across council functions and the compliance with the statutory biodiversity duty and BNG obligations for the period January 24 to January 26. Approve the commitment to the future actions 2026 to 2031 outlined in Section 3 of the attached report, which include establishing clear and measurable biodiversity objectives, strengthening staff and awareness and training, and continuing to enhance land and asset management for biodiversity outcomes, and to support the continued application of robust BNG validation, determination and enforcement processes, including the development of local habitat banks. Our role as a council is not only to do our best to influence national biodiversity policies via our NPPF responses and priorities, but also to ensure that everything we do strategically and in terms of our policies supports the complex biodiversity of our area and the wealth of our natural environments, from our beaches to our SSSIs to our parks to our open spaces. We will continue to do everything that we can to support biodiversity within Thanet and embed our responsibilities and our commitments within our policies. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Have a seconder, please. Councillor Bright. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Wing.
Thank you. Thank you. We're really pleased to see this come forward, obviously, and I think I'll concentrate on what we can actually see out in our areas. We can all see what is being achieved and what has been achieved in our communities. Trees, hedges, wild areas are popping up all over the place. We've been really good at working with community groups. The new open spaces team, I definitely think have got a new sort of way of working. I also think they're enjoying what they're doing more as well. They seem really positive when they've met with community groups or I've met with them, so they need a massive pat on the back because they're covering such a large area and the team isn't that big, and they're doing really good work. I think we also, and I think we're beginning to see a shift in all of our brains over the last few years in terms of, you know, we're seeing wild areas and unkempt areas where once we wanted to see them perfectly tended, and we're now seeing, you know, we're not worried about weeds popping up on the side or dandelions being all over the place, and I think that's to be commended really, and it has taken a shift in all of our brains. I think we also need, I think, to praise the large number of volunteers that we have in all our communities that are out there also helping support our open spaces, as well as our town and parish councils. And I certainly hope that once Margate gets their own town council, that they'll see the benefits of, in terms of their biodiversity and open spaces, they'll see an improvement. I just have two concerns really, and both of them are really out of our control, but it's worth keeping hold of them and jumping up and down and screaming when we can at the appropriate times. One is the Kent Local Nature Recovery Strategy does seem to have us as a grey area with not much in it, and we all know that view is completely different. I think, and I'm sure we could all agree, that we have an area which is huge, has a huge diversity of biodiversity. And the other thing that really concerns me is if Sea-Link goes ahead, then I can see we're going to have to deal with massive mitigations and impacts on quite a significant area of Pegwell Bay and the Minster Marshes. And I know myself, Tricia next to me, and Councillor Abby Smith will be spending more time at the open hearing next week trying to do all we can to, if we can't stop it, to make sure that just like Manston, there are controls in place to ensure that the devastation that it will cause will be reduced as much as possible. So I just wanted to make that point and thank everybody involved, and that includes everybody out there doing what they can for our environment.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. I think this is a big step towards embedding an understanding of biodiversity across all levels. So, as you're saying, it's absolutely right that we acknowledge the work that the town and parish councils do, that volunteers do, and the ability that this has to work as a catalyst in terms of being able to unite those groups and being able to put together shared values and a shared understanding. I think before this point, there's often been a lot that we've been doing as a council, but people haven't necessarily known about it. And just on a personal shout out, I would like to say thank you to Phoebe, who's our trees officer, because I go to a lot of the trees planting, and the varied nature of the number of species that we're looking at now is hugely appreciated and really, really interesting for those who are planting them in terms of how the trees are going to develop and what they will do for our individual ecosystems. So it very much feels like we're taking a large step up in terms of not only talking about what we do, but also creating very high standards across the board in terms of what we want to see for this area. I know that we've spoken endlessly about Sea-Link and the fact that I do not think that this is the right place for it. I think one of the chief issues that we face around biodiversity is the idea that loss of a specific habitat can be offset in other areas, which I do not also agree with because they are unique habitats. But in terms of what we can do as a council, I think we're getting ourselves onto a footing where we are as efficient and as competent as we can be, and I look forward to growing that further.
Thank you. Members, any comments? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to thank Councillor Wing actually for praising the open spaces team. There's been a hell of a lot of work done over the last couple of years in changing the way that they work. We've got a new, obviously we've got a new top team in there who've been brilliant, and the way it's managed, the way they and how they work with all of as many, I can't remember how many, but a lot of the volunteer groups and give them support as well. And I think that's the important part, and that cross-working is working. And I think that's the really important part, even to a point where I'm advised today that a document's been signed between CDC and Ramsgate Town Council for taking over certain parts of things that RTC can actually do. And that's another part of joint working between the two councils. And like you say, hopefully when Margate gets its town council, then they can take part in those things. So I think that's a really important part of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Councillor.
Yeah, Councillor Albans pretty much covered what I was going to say, actually, but I do think it's something that is noteworthy. It's difficult to know what you didn't know 4 years ago before I was a councillor, but certainly one of the things I heard from many of the groups out in the community was how they had no connection to the town council or in Broadstairs or the district council, and very, very quickly those barriers fell down. I was told when, just as an anecdote, when we first hired gardeners at the town council and wanted to take on Victoria Gardens on licence, I was told that it would take 18 months to get the licence for that and to begin work. It took less than 6 weeks before our gardeners were in, and that was the open spaces team and the new team that had arrived at the time. So I think it's really indicative of how it's working. And it's it's not just that, it's across. We just talked about the domestic abuse policy for TLS and the difference that they have talking to community groups that inform their opinion. So I think it's commendable for obviously officers, but also for members of this council who've done a lot to make those connections.
Members, are we done? Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. Last item is outside bodies. I'm going to leave the meeting. I suggest you might want to present it from there, Councillor Whitehead, rather than play musical chairs. We've probably had enough of that already this evening. And I bid everybody good night.
I need to declare an interest as well because I'm on the Thanet Regeneration Board.
This report seeks Cabinet's agreement to the appointment of the councillors listed below to the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board and the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board. It is recommended that Cabinet agree the appointment of Councillor Rick Everett to the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board, and the appointment of Councillor Rick Everett and Councillor Ruth Duckworth to the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board. At a meeting of full council on 24th February 2011, councillors decided the local choice function of appointment to outside bodies be split and be exercised by Cabinet when making the decision to appoint to bodies that relate to an executive function and council in relation to all other appointments. Latterly, a meeting of full council on the 26th of February 2026, councillors agreed that both the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board and the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board were bodies that relate to an executive function, and should therefore any appointments to these boards should be decided by the executive. Councillor Everett, as the current leader, is an appropriate appointment to the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board. As leader of the council, he brings a high-level understanding of the district's wider regeneration goals, ensuring Ramsgate's local projects align with broader economic strategies. Councillor Duckworth, as the Cabinet Member for Regeneration Property, is also considered an appropriate appointment as she has particular oversight of the council's property assets and regeneration portfolio. I move the recommendations set out in the report. Do we have anyone down to speak for? Okay. Any comments from Cabinet?
Just looking at alternative options.
Mean.
That would be a surprise.
Considering there are no contributions.
Well, I don't know yet. I haven't spoken yet.
I move the recommendations set out in the report, and I think that then leaves me to conclude
the business for this evening?
We haven't agreed it yet.
Oh, okay. Agreed. Agreed. That brings tonight's business to a close. Thank you very much to everyone in attendance.